So, thank you for everyone who sent in questions, be they on the forums or on Twitter or have been sending them in chat. We'll start with something from which I want to know, and I think this is kind of, so we've touched on before, is for both of you. What was your first experience of Fallout, and what made you want to get to do the RPG version? You know, when the chance presented it, you've already said, Sam, you were like stepping over other people to do it. So why is that? What is it about Fallout?
I don't know, it's just cool.
Cool, V. What about you? No, so you do want to add any more to that?
Well, you asked like what my first experience was. So I played Fallout 3 first of all on the Xbox back in college. I really loved it. Played it through a few times, played DLCs and stuff like that. Got so into it that we started up a UK-based LARP that was heavily inspired by, and that I have to say, heavily inspired by the copyright lawyers
Legal
listening out
reasons.
there. Yeah,
Legally
yeah.
distinct
It was legally distinct, actually. But yeah, we started a post-apoc LARP that was very heavily inspired by Fallout over here in the UK, and did that amateurly for a while. And then when Fallout 4 came out, like everyone, I played the living hell out of it. I'm gonna screw it. I'm not trying to be diplomatic. I tried playing Fallout 1, and it was an absolute travesty compared to modern game mechanics and narrative flow. And it's a product of its time, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who love it. I'm not one of those people, I'm afraid.
You couldn't retro Sam couldn't get past the clunkiness.
It's like I can't watch the original series of Star Trek. I just cringe.
That's why Sam and I are opposites here, because I'm a huge TOS fan and I love the old game.
And you're younger than me.
I know. The thing is, I also, by the time that I was playing video games, like as a kid, the systems I were playing on were already retro. So I feel like there's a bit of me that's just like really nostalgic about that, because those things were retro by the time I got to them. I mean, for me, Fallout was like Sam, it was Fallout 3 on the Xbox, but I was a teenager at the time. Fell in love with that, but could not get on with the metro tunnels. Sam will tell you, I have a thing about ghouls and them running about and up to me, and I'm not a fan of it.
I blame you.
And then I found New Vegas, which I fell in love with. It's just got such an iconic look, that kind of 50s. I really like the 50s kind of fashion and the way that they kind of pulled that styling into it. So like the whole look of Fallout is a big reason why I love it. But then I played Fallout 4 and fell in love with that, and I still haven't finished it because I got distracted by DLCs. Bethesda gives me DLCs and I'm like down the rabbit hole. And then actually while preparing to do the this Fallout role-playing game when I was a project manager on it in the early days, Bethesda very kindly sent me some codes for Fallout 1 and 2 because I wanted to go back and have a look and see if we could use elements from that and kind of what that looked like. And opposite to Sam, I really love Fallout 1 and 2. I think they're a much more ridiculous time for Fallout because there are some really weird things that happen in there. You've got like intelligent death claws, the TARDIS shows up. At one point you can find through like random travel just a diner in the middle of nowhere that's filled with all of the other potential vault dwellers that you could have been and why they didn't get used, and it's like a really meta thing.
Yeah.
It's really, it just take like Wild Wasteland. That was just all of Fallout 1 and 2. The fight with Frank Horrigan as well is just, when I saw that mini come out that we did of Frank Horrigan, I was like, oh my god, I remember sitting on stream for like hours trying to finish that fight. So it's really nostalgic for me. It reminds me of lots of long summers and school holidays.
Yeah.
Just like I could spend the whole day glued to my Xbox playing that, and it was always a really cool world. And when I got into role playing, after the first session I had, I remember thinking, it needs to be this for Fallout. I want to play Fallout on the tabletop and play pretend in there because it's weird and it's wacky, and now it exists, which is weird. 5 years, 6 years later.
Oh my god, yeah, definitely. So with that in mind, then I feel like this is going to be divisive even more as we pit old school versus new school against each other. Out of all the things that are in the game, in the Fallout role playing game, what are you most pleased of that like was implemented and that emulated something from the video game? The bit that you were just like, that's the bit. That's what feels Fallout to me. What would you say?
Well, I can't even lay claim to this really because it is kind of baked into the original design and also Nathan's development of 2D20 since we've been using it and adapting it for all the different brands that we work with. But the simple way that that 2D20 could just slot itself into that attribute and skill kind of interaction that happens. Yeah. You see a lot in Fallout 3 New Vegas that you saw in the original Fallout 1 and 2 because it was basic role-playing kind of GURPS based very originally, and then they splintered off and kind of then made it the special system. It was still percentile based. It was still based on skills and special kind of bouncing off each other. And it was just really satisfying to put that together and not really have to adapt all that much. So, for basically, if anyone in chat, if you're not playing it at the moment or if you haven't looked over the rules, you have your special stats. Luck works a bit differently, but the remaining 6, they are basically a scale of it's kind of about 4 to 10, right, depending on kind of what you take and what perks and stuff you can then use. And then you get your target number on the D20 that you're going to need to hit equal or under on from that plus the skill you're using. And the skills are modeled more or less on a kind of culmination of what was in like Fallout 3, a little bit of Fallout 1 and 2, and stuff like that. We had to insert like athletics in there just because in the, in the games they didn't really focus on that. But role-playing games, you're not literally either controlling a little doll with a controller. Equally, you're not running around a field with your own like weapon, play love. Yeah. So like you have to model athletics in a mechanic. But all the kind of familiar stuff, small guns, big guns, science, lock picking, all that kind of stuff that is really familiar is just the skill list that we use. So you just add one of those, that number with the attribute number you're using.
Yeah.
But where we differentiated slightly from Fallout is while there are some kind of default attributes that you would use with each skill, you don't have to. So you could use perception with lockpicking, but you could also use strength with lockpicking if you were trying to force open a lock. So it gives you or agility if it was being really precise, or so you've got lots of different options, and that's what kind of makes 2D20 work really well, I think.
Cool.
So basically, the core mechanics are my answer, Steve.
I mean, it's a broad answer, but I'll take it.
I'm kind of with Sam on this. I think the thing that really, really makes this feel like Fallout, rather than just a game system with the Fallout world wrapped around it, is the fact that 2D20 fits so well with the special system that you see in the games, and it's so familiar, and it doesn't feel like it's just been shoehorned in. I've definitely felt that in RPGs before, where it feels like something's been taken and just been kind of made to fit a system.
Yeah.
And this just kind of I remember Sam doing the early dev work on this and just watching him be like, this just works. It just works exactly as it is. But I also think that there is, because that's so familiar, regardless of the games that you play, like Fallout 1 and 2 had a very similar system, maybe a little bit clunkier back then, I'll admit. The other one I really like is how initiative is done in Fallout, because it's not a kind of roll for initiative like people are used to in role-playing games. You have a static initiative that's based off of your special scores. And I really like that because as a fan of the early games, that's kind of how it worked, because combat was turn-based in early combat. which could absolutely lead to you being surrounded by a pack of rad scorpions, just awaiting your turn-based death. But it feels like a little callback to those games that I really, really enjoy, and almost it's kind of refreshing from the kind of usual chaotic, okay, everybody roll, and now we add all of these things, and then it might change and shift. Just having that static initiative almost makes it a little bit quicker. Because once you've just got your player's initiative there, you can just, as a GM, insert all of your gribbly creatures in wherever they go, because they have an initiative score too. And it's usually the bit that, like, holds up combat at the start is like, everybody roll, and now call out your numbers. Now the GM's going to roll, 4 times for what
we're going to write it
whatever
down.
they're adding.
Yeah. Did you say 13 or 17? Oh, yeah.
Oh, I've moved the dice.
Including that modifier. Oh,
yeah.
no.
Yeah. No, it's always ironic that initiative is the thing which always takes the edge off combat. It's like, we're gonna have a big fight. It's amazing. Okay.
Yeah, you get that big descriptor bit at the beginning as you say how it works, and now we all stop for 5 minutes.
It's like a mate of mine once described it as being invited out to the most amazing club ever. You're like, we're going to this amazing club. It's gonna be great. They've got amazing DJs. It's gonna be fantastic. Then you have to queue to get in. And you're outside, just like waiting for the fun to happen. It's like, I want to be inside now.
Yeah, but that especially is because I like the old games and I've played them like recently in the last few years. Every time I see that, and when we were kind of play testing that and play testing some of the adventure bits back in the earlier days, that always just felt like Fallout 1 and 2 to me, which is a little bit nostalgic, but does give me nightmares about rad scorpions.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. That's fine. You should have nightmares about rad scorpions. You don't have nice dreams about them.
Look, all I'm saying is in Fallout 4, you have it easy.
This is true. Okay, let's have a couple of questions which people have sent in. I think the first one we'll go for is one that SS 2077 or 2077 has sent in chat. Which ties into what you were saying about the different kinds of games, is in terms of narrative storytelling, do you prefer the worlds and narratives of Fallout 1, 2, Tactics 3, New Vegas 4? It's like, where do you feel the best stories come from, the ones that take inspiration from for a role-playing game?
I don't know.
I mean, not one from you, I guess that's clear, Sam.
Yeah, one and 2 are really good in terms of kind of like world elements. There are some really interesting world elements that you can pull from that if you want to have a game that jumps out. Because like I said, you do have things like intelligent death claws, and that is kind of you do find out about weird vault stuff going on.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of interesting history there that you can make matter in a game in a later period. But the narrative is very, very linear. I feel like New Vegas did really well with narrative and big branching choices that had a really kind of sometimes devastating effect on the world's landscape. Because obviously you have who you're going to side with. You've got the kind of the 3 core factions there. I think it's probably between New Vegas and 4. 4 had a lot of interesting stuff with the Institute going on. And a lot of the DLCs. I'm a big fan of the Nuka World DLC, where you actually interact with a bunch of raider gangs, which kind of previously you either shot the raiders, hunted the raiders for reward, or maybe I think there's like one quest in Fallout New Vegas where you might trade with them.
Yeah.
But otherwise, you don't really get to talk to them. You don't really get to find out.
They're just guys in the desert.
They're just dudes trying to kill you.
Wearing tires. Yeah.
Dudes trying to kill you for your stuff. And so I feel like Fallout 4 opened a lot of doors into bits of the setting that we didn't get to see. Because you've also got kind of like the Chinese submarine with the kind of ghoulified submarine commander. So it starts to pull on things that Fallout 3 kind of hinted at. And obviously Fallout 3 hinted massively at the Institute because we had the synth in Rivet City that didn't get revealed for ages until Fallout 4 came out. So I think 4 is kind of the culmination of a lot of previous narrative stuff that happened in like Fallout New Vegas and 3, like story-wise and mechanics-wise. and then a lot of building up of background from those earlier games too. So I think it's good that 4 is the basis for the role playing game, because I think that's where a lot of the potential is.
I think that potential is also not as maybe necessarily well signposted in terms of taking it to a tabletop role playing game,
right?
Than say maybe it was better signposted in kind of the earlier Fallout games, with the kind of places that you were visiting, and you had the freedom to explore and to really understand what those places were like and what their basis, what why they were there, what the basis of them was. But in 4, you've actually got, I think the world grew, not physically necessarily, but it had a bit more depth to it, because and this stuff that we go into the in the rule book that we put together, we managed to get signed off, was what are Poseidon Energy and what are they up to, and how do you use that as a hook for your players to spin off a little adventure or something like that. It's not just what are Vault Tech up to, but what are all these other corporations up to? What is Robco up to? And stuff like that. And so I think you have to really find it in Fallout 4. Whereas I also feel that Fallout 3 and New Vegas particularly allowed you with that little bit more freedom to explore and to find things out. Well, the whole kind of Tenpenny Tower arc, where you just you can blow up Megaton if you want. There has a lasting impact on the game, that the area that you explore, but it's not pivotal to the to the main quest line. And you think of the main quest line of Fallout 4, you can still blow something up. You can still blow up the Institute. You can still blow up the Brotherhood of Steel airship if you want, but that's part of the main quest.
Yeah, they're tied to that main story. And some of the older Fallout games did have a good thing about. A lot of it was here are the consequences of your actions, which I think is why a lot of people loved Fallout as the kind of video game RPG that it was, because you blow up Megaton because you think you're finally free of Moira, and there she is as a ghoul right there in the Natural History Museum, still making you do quests for her. But there's consequences to that, and the way that people perceive your character. New Vegas did that really well with their kind of reputation system. You could be loved by one faction but vilified by the other, and that had repercussions, because if you upset Caesar too much, he sent legionnaires after you, and they were really hard to kill. But what Sam was saying about the kind of the corporations and stuff like that, I remember when briefing out the core book and kind of working out what we wanted to have in those chapters and where we were exploring, I remember making the decision of Sam, I wanna have this whole section on these companies that existed pre and post war, alongside just general Commonwealth law, because a lot of the pre-war, it determines why the war came about and why people are the way they are now, because it's that kind of, it's the misunderstanding of what pre-war was like that makes Fallout so interesting. So in New Vegas, you see it with the Kings. And they all dress around, but they have no idea who Elvis Presley is, because some of that's been lost. But they've kind of picked it up and reshaped it into something. So I thought it was really important that we did see these kind of pre-war corporations and the effect that they had on the world and why it looks the way that it does. Because a lot of them were hiding really horribly dark secrets. Everything pre-war was just a little bit evil. And a lot of that explains why, you go into that building and there's a Securitron trying to kill you. Or, the little emergency robots, which I think are my favourite, and I can't think of what they're called right now, but you get all the different kinds that sneak up behind them and reprogram them for certain things. And that explains a lot of what's going on, and I think that's really where a lot of the story is. It doesn't have to just involve, do we fight the Brotherhood, or, do we fight this faction? A lot of it is in what happened in the past and kind of rediscovering that and how that rebuilds for the future. Protectrons, that's it. Thank you, chat.
Okay.
They're my favourite. They were my favourite NPC to write. I remember writing them up and then being I don't know if I've got the word count for this, but I really want to do a little thing so that tells you. There's a kind of sidebar box that says, if you want to make your Protractron, a police one or a fire brigade one, here's the changes that you make. Because I always loved coming across them and seeing
just like the weird variations of them.
Weird variations that you get. Yeah.
Okay, let's have another one. One here from, again, pronunciation of usernames in chat, not my strong point, so apologies if I get this wrong, but Kuvenet, hello, asks, the core book is set in the Commonwealth. Will we see more in-depth location books like New Vegas, DC, etc.?
Possibly, but I wouldn't count on it, because getting setting material approved is the most difficult thing. Getting setting material and original adventures approved is proving very difficult for us at the moment. Equally because, obviously, Bethesda are very careful about their IP, but also because, I don't know if you noticed, but they're very, very busy people.
Yeah, they've got stuff on.
Yeah, so we're actually, I don't mind saying without really saying too much about it, but we're kind of reassessing what supplements we might put out for the line, actually. And I'm thinking that we skew more towards kind of rule supplements. So we give you the tools that you can that you need to be able to role play in those wastelands.
Yeah.
But I don't know how much detail, in-depth lore and conjecture, certainly, we can actually put into a book, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's
setting materials always really hard, because a lot of what I worked on when I was at Modiphius was video game licenses, so Fallout, Homeworld as well. Is that video games only really, a lot of the time you find out the lore that exists for the purpose of being in the game.
Yeah.
So sometimes you'll go through and you'll be like, oh, okay, so there's this thing. Cool. Have you got an explanation for why this is? Because we need that for the context of the book. And it'll be like, no, that just kind of is what it is. And Fallout, luckily, has got a long history, but they very well curated kind of the modern Fallout lore from what it used to be. So Fallout 1 and 2, there's a lot that happened there that, while is canonical, has been really pared down to work for the modern games, which makes it really difficult to navigate, and also lengthy and time-consuming for Bethesda to approve, because if we reference something that's in Fallout 2, there's probably maybe one or two people, maybe at Bethesda, that maybe worked on that game or know about it in depth enough to answer lore questions on it, because that lore has been so curated down for the modern games that there's nobody there who's an expert on everything about Fallout 1, like they do have people who are experts on Fallout 4 and kind of the world building for that. So lore is the trickiest thing, and it's also the most time consuming for a licensor to read as well.
Also, people are saying in chat, and it's very true, there are already existing books, the Fallout Bible is a great resource, and we've had a question where someone said, how much did you dive into wikis and stuff? And so that stuff is the sort of thing that you can quite easily use. Don't get us wrong. We'd love to make more books and sell you more stuff, but the practical GM in me is this is where you would get the best information. It really is.
Well, thinking back to Star Trek, I have people who might be watching this within Modiphius probably laughing because I talk about Star Trek all the time. Anyway, that's the reason we didn't put a whole butt ton of timeline information or setting information into Star Trek Adventures. We focused on what would be useful, but we didn't focus on every single tiny little canonical aspect of the setting, because we'd be here we'd have printed 20 books by now, not the 10 kind of thing that we have.
Yeah, and also
because you can get that material elsewhere.
Yeah.
Memory Alpha is the best resource for that, not our books.
Yeah, fans are crazy about the licenses they love, and the Fallout Wiki is so comprehensive. Sam and I spent a lot of time on the Fallout Wiki, a lot of time.
Yeah.
And most of what's on there is fairly accurate. And I remember a couple of times that even Bethesda themselves said to us, we think the wiki is actually really comprehensive. So, go and have a check there before. And if you can't find it there, come and speak to us. But You know, they have people that look at that Wikipedia page, and obviously, I mean, as they would, like any licensor would on a, you know, on a forum that's entirely about their IP.
Yeah.
So we got referred there a lot to do stuff, and a lot of what we pulled came from things like the wiki and kind of all the background reading for things. And I remember recommending it to writers when they were writing a lot of the core book of like, this is a great place to go. Whereas some, you know, which is really great to have, because I had stuff on my portfolio like Homeworld, where we had to go a lot of going back to the original writers and asking them to write us resource documents, because lots of what we were looking at only ever existed kind of behind the scenes that was never showcased. So having an IP like Bethesda, where its fans are so hardcore about documenting everything, is like, if it doesn't matter where you want to run a game. If you want to run a game set in Fallout 1, the wiki will give you literally everything that you need, barring the rules that you find in the core book.
Yeah, exactly. And then that's yours to then change. And, you know, if you want to stick to canon, go for it. If you want to break it open and change things little by little, do that too. That's the beauty of it. Which leads us into another question, which is another one from SS2077, who basically asks, ties into what we were saying earlier about the exchange working with a licensor and stuff like that. So when there are notes and licenses and things are going back and forward, how does that work with something like us putting together the RPG? Are we effectively writing for quote unquote canon? Like, if something is in here, say you were writing this and you made up an NPC and you called it Bob, is Bob canon because Bob's in here?
No, Bob is not canon.
Bob!
So the way, unfortunately, the way it kind of works, and I'm sure Sam can correct me if this has changed since my time at Modiphius, is that all of the settings, so the Commonwealth lore that you find in there, in all of those setting chapters, is canon, but it is canon to the very start of Fallout 4. So if you just picked your Fallout 4 character up in the video game and dropped them in a place, you are seeing it as if you've just dropped them there before anything has happened. And that is to do with the way that Bethesda likes to present stuff about their lore with these kind of products, is that we don't hardline write any choice that could be made in the video game, because the video games are an open world. And what happens canonically in Fallout sometimes differs from what you see in the games.
Cool.
There are things that events that Bethesda consider canon to things happening, but obviously, so things like you know, who won the Battle of Hoover Dam, for example. There is a canonical answer that then plays into how that affects the rest of the Fallout universe, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's canonical for your playthrough of the video game, for example, because you might side with someone else. So that gets a bit tricky to navigate, because fans will always have, you know, the way that they think it should have ended because they did this playthrough, or what actually happened that then plays into the next part of the story Bethesda are telling through their IP. So even with our adventures and things like that, there are canonical locations. One of them features a vault, a canonical vault. I think it's Vault 95, but I can't remember off the top of my head. It's whichever one was filled with like gamblers and stuff. But the adventures that we set there are not canonical, as in like they are not recognized in official canon lore that yes, this player group party and this doctor came through here and this stuff happened. It is playing in the set piece of a canonical world.
So with that in mind, this ties in something that we got asked on the forums by Batro, who asked a couple of questions, but one was with licensing stuff, how does it work? Do we have the right to? Is there going to be plans for a new region, not in the video games, or is it, like you said, taking that kind of sandboxing in an existing zone, and what you do is like a tangent?
Yeah, we don't have any plans. I don't think we'd be able to have an original setting like, say, we did for the Shackleton Expanse for Star Trek. So what
it's a bit harder
really
to just add an extra bit on America, isn't it? You know, you can't.
Or take a piece that they haven't, covered and then try and make that our own. Because Bethesda want the ability to do that themselves, and I don't begrudge them that. It is their IP. And so, what I'm really about more nowadays is giving you the tools to be able to basically go, well, what if my hometown What if we did our hometown? What kind of weird things would be there? What kind of spin could we give on it? And that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's what you'll see more of in the future, I think.
I think so. That makes sense.
There's-
Oh, sorry, V. Do you want to?
I was going to say, there's a surprising amount of information buried in Fallout lore about what's actually going on in the rest of America. And even in the UK, so Europe had resource wars at the same time America had the Great Wars. If you dig around on the wiki, you can actually find out a lot of information about places that aren't seen directly in the games, but are referenced, and kind of bits that have come out of the various studios that have produced Fallout in its time that they have released. So
this stream
a lot
not
there,
sponsored by Fallout Wiki.
That.
Yeah, no, it's one of the things. It's like anyone who's ever fallen down a wiki rabbit hole, you know, you can just create entire games and stories out of just hitting the random button. It's perfectly doable. So let's have a few. I think we'll have a couple more. Let's have some more tactile ones. Is that the correct word? Probably not. It's late in the day and I need another coffee. Let's talk about the actual product that we're at. So there is updates coming for the core rulebook, I understand, with the errata. Do we have a timeline on any of that sort of stuff? This is from Kakura on the forums.
Yeah, so we do have some more errata that's coming out. And we've got that kind of logged into the backlog of the graphic designer's bandwidth at the moment. So if you haven't noticed already, we are going to be crowdfunding an Elder Scrolls board game, huge adventure board game, that's going to GameFound later in the year. And so we are very focused on that as a company at the moment. So once we get that out of the way, it's just a very short job to get the errata plugged into our working core rulebook files for you to get a new PDF, essentially. And there'll be a little errata log that goes along with that as well, like you had for the previous errata round.
Nice one. And speaking of errata, let's put our cards on the table here. There's unfortunately tends to always be the need for errata, but Grendel's asked on Modiphius forums, what steps are we planning to take for quality control going forward? Because, you know, there are some mistakes in the book, but what are we going to do about that sort of stuff going on forward?
With other products or with this one?
I think all of them. It's not. I don't think we. Correct me if I'm wrong. You're the head of product. I am merely the host. But I would assume we don't treat product A differently from product B when it comes to things like, you know, errata and or copy editing.
Yeah. So, you know, we have a copy editing process. We have a proofing process as well. And so we'll be copy editing and proofing manuscripts before they go into layout. And then we'll also be reviewing those layout files after those have been laid out and before they go off to PDF and to print. There are always going to be, you know, little creeping in errors in anything that we make, in anything that any other publisher makes. But, you know, we are having a look at our editorial process in the future. So we'll have a look at that.
It's part of the thing, isn't it?
But I don't have any like amazing, you know, we're going to do this, that, and the other kind of steps at the moment. We're investigating more than anything.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's like it's never something that is intended, and I think we, you know, as any publisher, I've worked for more than one publisher in my time, and unfortunately, it's kind of like a silent war that occurs between the copy editor and that, you know, that rogue semicolon that you never saw, or the page reference. It
can be difficult.
It can be.
I mean, I edit and proofread professionally as well. And I line edited a lot of stuff I worked on at Modiphius. And it doesn't matter how, it's amazing how easy it is to read a document so much that you kind of go word blind to it. And then you pass it on to someone else. And there's always the one error that you get to the end and you look at it and 5 people have looked at it and missed it. And it's not because it's not because there's a lack of quality or a lack of care.
No.
It's just kind of human error that happens, especially when you're dealing with, you know, I can't remember what the word count was on the Fallout core rulebook now, but I've worked on rulebooks that have, you know, 10,000, 100,000 words, and that might not even be the full thing. And it's
Yeah.
It's a lot of words.
It is. And also these books, although we have here, Sam as head of product and Virginia as writing and design, other loads of other people worked on this. Nathan is in chat right now. Hello, Nathan, being lovely. And you just have to look at the front of the book to see how many people. All these books are collaboratively written, which means they're collaboratively written across, file sharing sites. File sharing sites? Good lord, no. We don't put it on Napster. There's a flashback for
online
you.
Living
yeah,
documents.
online living documents. And, all you need is... I just aged myself very skillfully there. There's always the potential for that, the more people you have. This isn't to say this is an excuse. It's not just going, because,
it's an insight into kind of how that...
I've been a copy editor, and when I pick up I can't go to a restaurant now. I just look at a menu, and instantly I'm like, what? Strawberries? That's not spelt like that. You can't unsee it, and it's equally annoying, if not more, when you see it in something that we
really
take pride
about.
in, which we do. So, it is one of those things. Sorry, but we're trying. We're going to try. We try.
And whenever this conversation comes up, I always point people to the coffee cup in season 8 of Game of Thrones.
Yes.
Yeah. That ended up in broadcast.
Yeah, I mean...
Think how many people and how many layers of process that went through before it ended up on air.
Thousands of times more than RPG.
But yeah, anyway, that's enough of that. Let's have one last question. And I think we will go back to... actually, no, here's a quick one. Then we'll have another one. From Stiletto Assassin in chat, any plans for things like expanded bestiaries? So things that aren't necessarily baked into lore, but are just like, you like robots? I got more robots, or whatever.
I mean, potentially there might be some leveled up versions of stuff that we've put out already. Like I said before about original content, I think it's going to be very difficult to create something that's new and like a new NPC that's not in the games or anything. But yeah, one thing I definitely want to do in whatever form that comes out in, I want to expand on the kind of variety of NPCs that we have, and include any that we haven't already seen either from Fallout 4 or from other games as well.
Cool. And one last question. This is from another one, because thank you, SS2077. You gave us more questions than I thought were humanly possible in a short space of time. But my gosh. It's a quick one. In general, what games or non-game sources do you guys look to when you're looking to write a 2D20 campaign source book? Because obviously Fallout is the main inspiration. Were there any other kind of side quests for that,
I feel like for me, for Fallout, because I did a lot of reading into... I was already a Fallout nerd to start with, and then kind of went off the deep end when I had to start briefing the books and some of that early work. There is not... a lot of it I felt like was just diving into Fallout, because Fallout, although you can see kind of bits of its inspiration, it's obviously very heavily inspired by kind of 50s Americana, and that kind of style. It's very inspired by the kind of feelings and thoughts around kind of nuclear power at that time in America, and what would have the big one is what would have happened if the microchip hadn't been invented but nuclear power became accessible. But Fallout itself is almost its own entity on its own. It's so unique in its style and its genre that it's kind of hard to kind of follow out some of the things that inspired that without losing what makes Fallout. But a lot of it is just going back and looking at the older games and trying to figure out, what were the intentions of the people who designed this and designed the narrative lore. So what kind of experience were they looking for people to have, and trying to translate that, and that kind of permeates any writing you do with a licensed RPG. When I was writing the NPC sections, a lot of the character descriptions was kind of what were when writing those, what were the designers of these creatures when they appear in game, from how they play, from how you find out about them in world? What kind of feelings are they trying to make you feel towards these things? You know, am I supposed to be terrified of rad scorpions? Am I supposed to feel empathy for ghouls? And kind of that's the key thing, the underlying thing that I feel like you look for when you write in RPGs, coming from a licensed property, is what was the experience that those people were trying to give you when they made the original IP? What kind of tone were they going for? What feelings? What did they want you to focus on? And then you draw out those elements, and then you try and translate that into what you write. And I think Fallout does that. This RPG does that really well with Fallout, because I think Sam has a amazing understanding of you know, Fallout, because he's a huge Fallout nerd like I am, but also, you know, Sam's really good at all of that narrative stuff.
Yeah, I'm all right at it.
I mean,
I'm
you
all
trained
right.
it, you should be, but
Yeah.
Fair enough.